persuasive speech. All right. Have you ever heard someone say, once an addict, always an addict, or they'll never change, or that's who they are? Have you ever stopped to think about what words mean and how they sound when someone who already feels ashamed, hopeless, or afraid can ask for help? One of the biggest things I've learned, both professionally and personally, is you don't know the story until you know the story. Addiction has affected my life in many ways. I have struggled and I've seen others. I've had a family, and I also work in a substance use treatment facility. I also study alcohol and drug counseling. I have seen damage that addiction can cause, but I've also seen something else, how well that someone can recover. Most of us probably know someone who has been affected by addiction. Maybe it's a family member or a friend or a coworker, but it affects our community. Today, I want to persuade you that our words that we use about addiction can matter. They can become a barrier or they can be a part of healing and recovery. First, I will explain how stigma affects people, and then I'll explain what each of us can do to help change that conversation. We really don't know someone's whole story, but before we judge them, we need to understand what stigma and labels can do. Stigma includes negative labels. It includes stereotypes and judging treatment of someone else as though they're worth less than another person. The truth is, we often don't know how the addiction began. It could have begun with trauma, it could have begun with grief, or untreated mental illness. Others have just experienced it through a family member. Some people develop dependence after taking prescription medications by a trusted physician, but every story is different. So our words like addict, junkie, or drunk, that doesn't tell the story, and it reduces an entire person to one label. Some people think they're only words, but our words matter. They often tell how other people sees the other person, and sometimes how they see themselves. Sometimes that even affects a young child. And according to the Shatterproof Addiction Language Guide, self-stigma has it has opened up to when people begin the negative labels and placed on them. The guide also explains how stigmatizing language can contribute to isolation and lower self-esteem, and it makes people less willing to seek treatment. Language can also change how we judge people, and according to 2020 peer-reviewed article published in Substance Abuse Treatment and Prevention and Policy, that one explains earlier research found that people described as a substance abuser were blamed more and judged more harshly than someone using a person first, person with a substance use disorder. The person didn't change, just the language. That judgment can become a real barrier to treatment. And according to a 2015 Herald Times article by Lauren Slavin, found in the Points of View database, stigma can keep people from contacting treatment and providing services that are available to them. Sometimes help is available, but shame keeps people from walking through the front door. Stigma can begin during childhood as well. Some children grow up hearing this child will grow up to be just like their parent that's struggling with addiction. Those words can stay with someone for years, but no child has a destiny like someone else's story. Now that we understand the problem, here's what we can do about it. None of us are going to solve the addiction crisis by ourselves, but every one of us can choose our words that we use when we're describing someone suffering with this disease. One practical step is using a person-first language. Instead of saying addict, say a person with substance use disorder. Instead of saying former addict, drug screen was dirty, say the person tested positive. But they remind us that addiction is something that a person experiences, and it is not their identity. Changing our language doesn't excuse harmful behavior. People should always be held accountable for any kind of actions, but accountability does not require humiliation. We can acknowledge the harm addiction causes while recognizing that the person is full of dignity, and that happens so that we are not judging. We can encourage treatment instead of adding shame, and we can remember that asking for help requires courage, humility, and surrender. We never know how difficult time that person had just saying, I need help. 3 words. According to a 2024 Wyoming Tribune Eagle article from the Points of View database, recovery advocates educating communities, humanizing people with substance use disorders, and changing how we talk about addiction. This is something all of us can do. So today I explained how stigma creates shame, isolation, and fear that can keep people from asking for help. I also explained that we can become a part of the solution. We can listen to people, we can listen to facts, and we can judge based on our thoughts, but not based on their story. This is my call to action, and it's not simple, but it is not hard. We think before we speak, we choose our words that build hope instead of shame, and we replace labels with understanding. At the beginning of my speech, I said, you don't know the story until you know the story. I still believe this is true. None of us can see every battle that someone faces. None of us know what it took for a person to walk through the door or ask for help. But every one of us can decide whether our words are going to be a part of their barrier or a part of their healing. Sometimes the first step toward recovery is someone choosing compassion instead of a label.